consider minutes of the last meeting. Everybody likes them, somebody can make a motion.
Move to accept the minutes of the June 12th meeting.
Second. I'm going to make a motion to approve the minutes as presented. Wendell seconded. Any more discussion? All in favor, aye. Any opposed? Motion carried. Financial report.
All right. For income, under interest income, one for $1.26, 46 cents, 30 cents, 42 cents, 122.38, and 22.02. Our loans, this is interest on our unrestricted loans, $9.98 and 82 cents. Our RBAG loans, $3.80, 65.58, 101.25, 95.47, 42.40, and 76.44. And then we have some corrections of 13.32, 9.04, 6.43, and 3.79. As Jeannie went back and was working on amortization schedules and what had been deposited, there would need to be some corrections in terms of accrued interest, because sometimes if someone let that go, made a payment or a double payment, then that affects interest and amortization. So she kind of had to go through and get the amortization schedules and what's in the profit and loss details to line up. So those are corrections, basically, because of the interest changes. Startup Kansas loans, interest 83.11, 40.89, 95.67, and then interest income other is 61.56. All right, under loan processing fees, we've got 3 at $25 each. In June, we also deposited our mill levy from the county at $45,742.71. And then we've got an over-under of $642. And then for our countywide real estate open house, 2 more deposits from participating properties of $50 each. So total income is $46,780 and 52 cents. Under expenses, tax prep, we've got 2 months for one for May and then one for June of $250 each. For the the Healthy Living Master Plan, the final payment to Schwab Eaton for that project was $1,538. For Spencer Preservation, for our Historic Preservation Fund grant and the survey and National Register nomination project of $6,500. Interest income to Startup Kansas, 41.30, 84.67, and then 97.51. And this is another expense, or actually it's a credit, $49.03. Again, Jeannie was going back to one of the loans that had just closed out. As she looked back at the amortization schedule, somewhere there was a discrepancy way back. She thinks it was in 2011. But basically, to get the amortization schedule and our books to line up, we had to do a credit of $49.03 on that. But she can't entirely track exactly what happened way back when, so she just thought this is easier just to call it good and kind of make sure everything balances in that
She
way.
wasn't doing it like that anyway.
No, the Wakanda Trader for $150.54. EO Communications for $43.55. Insurance, workman's comp. We actually got a refund of $3, so I put it in the bank. For payroll, QuickBooks payroll of $350. For Kelly Larson, $48.63.33. Chris Heinze, $504. FICA, Kelly Larson, $276.73. Chris Heinze, $31.25. Medicare, Kelly Larson, $64.72. Chris Heinze, $7.31. And for the open house, the Facebook ads, I requested reimbursement for those of $160. And then I attended a conference down in Pratt for $147.32, reimbursement of expenses, and then created the registration for that conference, and that was $30. Questions? Comments?
No questions, no comments? We'll file it subject to audit and move on to the marketing coordinator's report.
Just kind of provided her update of what she's been working on. The homeownership program, we talked about this a little bit, but the North Central Regional Planning Commission with their homeownership, the $10,000 0% interest loan, $2,000 towards grant towards closing costs. We did some publicity on that in terms of putting it on the website and Facebook and an email blast. We also put an ad on Next Set Classifieds, just kind of a general ad saying like 20 properties for sale in Lincoln County, and then try to have a link to this homeownership program in all of our real estate listings. And so she worked on that. The historic surveys, again, putting information on the website about that, social media, and email information on that. Bike Across Kansas came through town last month, and so we kind of scrambled to know who was providing food and put together a flyer and put it on some Bike Across Kansas Facebook pages. Let's see, the Kansas Post-Rock Limestone Coalition meeting. This is 17 counties that are trying to coordinate together to promote the Post-Rock area. I've asked Chris if she would be interested in getting involved in that in terms of one, so that's a meeting that I don't necessarily have to go to. And she is interested, so she went last month, and I think she's going to go to the next meeting that will be held in Wilson, just to make sure that we are an active part of that organization and what's going on. Let's see, the open house. She refers to a final report to the board, which is the next page, and continuing to put job posts out on Facebook. So, and I guess with the countywide open house, just you kind of see this is a summary of our plan, and what our expenses were. I came in at about $564 in terms of expenses, and that was less than what we were anticipating. But part of that's because the Wakanda Trader screwed up our ad, and so They weren't going to give us a great break on their bill to us. It was supposed to be 300 something, but when I got the bill for 150, I decided I wasn't going to argue with them. Less than what they told me they weren't going to take off very much originally. But then the next page is also kind of just our first look at the Facebook, kind of the impressions that we had and the results and where the costs were on that. Total costs on Facebook ads was about $384. But we kind of tried to do different targets, the reach and impressions, and a lot of times we're trying to, Facebook, when you do an ad, they want to know what's the end result that you want. Do you want people to click on your website? Do you want people to say they're going to an event? You got to tell them what you want, and then the ad is sort of targeted towards that way. So we always said that what we wanted the end result to be was for people to click and say they're going to our event or is interested in our event. Although the overall impressions was pretty good, I think. But you can kind of see where the costs were for each of that. On kind of a side note, yesterday on the open house I was talking to somebody, and there's a lot of houses that are now under contract. This is coming from Deb Manier, Land Home Title, but Deb feels like a lot of that had to do with doing the open house and kind of all the marketing that we put out there. I think the homeownership program is also kind of kickstarting people. So a couple houses that have been on the market forever, it seems like, are now under contract. At least 3 of the properties that will participate in the open house are under contract. And a number of other ones too. So that made me feel like we did a good thing with that event. Any questions on marketing stuff? Move on. All right, the first thing is the e-community program updates. And we've got Shahira over here with Network Kansas. So I guess just kind of before I turn it over to you, we've been in the e-community program for 3 years now. And every year we need to sign an agreement in terms of what our relationship is with Network Kansas on the e-community program. I didn't necessarily see anything drastically different from what we've done before. This agreement is just to kind of participate in the e-community program as a whole. A while ago we were talking about the loan servicing agreement, and we had some issues there, and we kind of chose not to sign that at this point just because we don't use specifically the loan funds at this time. So this is not the same as what that discussion was a couple months ago. And I guess I'll turn it over to you.
Yep. So I wanted to kind of give some updates on Network Kansas and the program in general. I think last year, you guys came in at a time where we really started to look a little bit more at the program. We've had the program since 2007. We started with 6 communities at the time. Now we're with 64 communities throughout the state. You guys joined the partnership a few years ago. Up until really those few years, it was kind of the same thing every year. We'd make little tweaks here and there as we started the program. But a couple years ago, we decided to really try to make it more of a partnership. So we put together a scoring system where the communities, we looked at the loan data, we looked at the activity with hosting events and programs, and as a leadership team meeting regularly and all those things. And so this last year, a lot of communities, they kind of changed their mindset and stepped up to the plate and really used the program. Because, some of the data we look at is like loans per year, are the community's loaned money. And a lot of them, maybe they've marketed the program, maybe they've talked to the bankers, and we did some things to get it out there. or they decided, okay, well, we're going to step up to the plate and host a bunch of events or, what have you. So that was one thing that we kind of experienced this last year, is the community's just going crazy with it, most of them, or a lot of them. Another thing that kind of popped up around Labor Day in the fall this last year, we found out that there was some change on the federal side of the way tax credits affected the income liability. And for us, that's a big deal. It has nothing to do with Network Kansas because it's a federal thing, but we fill our pockets, the loan funds and things, with the tax credits that we sell every year. And so I'll give you kind of an example of the old way versus the new way, just so you know. Our tax credit is a 75% tax credit. So the math, the kind of easy math I usually say, is if somebody somebody has $1,000 income liability at the end of the year, they could pay it and be done, or they can donate $1,000 to Network Kansas, and $750 would be credited to their state income liability. Additionally, they can take that $1,000 donation and report it on the federal side. And they would say, for instance, if somebody's in the 28th percent tax bracket, they'd get an additional 280 credits on top of their 750. You'd get 1,030 credits on a $1,000 donation. So people would literally make money depending on the tax bracket and the amount of credits or donations that they purchased. What has changed now, though, is that on the state side it's still the same, 750. But now on the federal side, they've said we'll only take the difference of the $1,000 donation and the 750. So they'll say 28% of 250 now instead of 20% of 1,000. That's like $70 or something. So you get 820 credits on a $1,000 donation instead of 1,030 credits. So now it actually is a way we have to get actual donations and request funds. And I think, that alone is going to be a harder sell for us. And second of all, just that it changed kind of abruptly at the end of this last year. Normally we sell 2 million tax credits, and that's what we use every year. We sold 1.4 million. So we were almost half of what we've sold in the past. And so with the amount of activity growing and then the amount of less money coming into our funds, just so you guys know, there are a little bit of some reining in of funds this coming year. The main things is we do think it's pretty temporary. A couple good news. Eric and Steve, the CEO and VP of Network Kansas, went and actually, it's a law now, but there was a thing called a privilege tax where banks as entities can purchase our tax credits. It's just kind of something that's been a rule for as long as I know. But now they can. So coming, this year we'll be able to sell tax credits to banks, and so that's kind of another pool of group to sell to. A lot of our e-communities have bankers on their boards, so I think that will be helpful for us. We've also said, if we do sell all the 2 million this year with the help of the banks, and now that we've figured out the messaging and things like that, that probably within the next year or two that we request more tax credits. Maybe instead of 2 million, we get 3 or 4 million. And so we'll have more money coming into the fund. We also have Eric's we have a little bit more staff and people moved around where Eric's freed up, and he said his kind of main goal this next year is to look for grants and some things to refill those funds. So there's some good things that are coming out of it, but the main things to know in the award agreement of what has changed on just being a part of the partnership and access to funds is that there's going to be a check-in point of $50,000 for loan funds. Once you do 1 or 2 loans, and I guess, we're kind of on a pause anyways with the service agreement, but if you do 1 or 2 loans, I'll just have to kind of see if I have enough funds in my budget to say, okay, you can do another one. The main thing to know there is that there's $2.95 million available for the Central Region e-communities, about 20 communities. Last year, the same about 20 communities spent like 3.15. So we're really only reining in a bit less. So I don't think it'll be too much of a, me having to say no, maybe towards the end of the fiscal year, but there's also a chance that Eric may have found some grants and things to refill those buckets too. So that's just something to note, is that there'll be I'll be a little bit more involved with the budget, and after you do 1 or 2 loans, I'll have to be like, well, we'll see. The program side, and it is on here a couple pages down. With the scoring, we have, It has nothing to do with good, mediocre, bad, level 1, 2, and 3, or ABC, sounding like, a level of, good or bad. It really just has to do with engagement and use of the program. And then, of course, with the changes that we have, we've had to tighten some things on where we think people sit. So just engagement. But as far as programs go, I have you guys on level C with the scoring. So you have, if you do an Ice House class, you get up to 1,000 per class. Makerspace Boot Camp, if somebody goes to attend this Makerspace Boot Camp to talk about a Makerspace, 750, Destination Boot Camp. So there's still funds there available. The other thing to think about, or to know too, is that we've put more funds into our budget for me, what we're calling a discretionary fund. And so, because we've kind of said, this first group of called board certified programs, that first kind of dark line underneath those are what Network Kansas has kind of put their stamp of approval on. A lot of the communities have went to some of these programs or hosted some of these programs, and they like it. So we put money into that. Well, there's money that we're calling discretionary budget that I also will be a little bit more involved in. But if you're hosting something that has something in general to do with entrepreneurship, supporting entrepreneurship, I have money that I can spend to make sure that gets done well. That's not within the board certified program. So basically, the main thing they need to know this coming year is that if you need money for anything entrepreneurship related, ecosystem building, whether it be loans or programs or something specific, just let me know. And there's, at least for the first, and if we plan ahead and we talk about some of the things that we want to do, if it's on the calendar, we can allocate funds for it now and we can make it happen. And the next, I guess the back side of that is the loan side. Oh, that's the Western. Oh yeah, you guys are on the Western. With basically the way the map's laid out, I kind of mentioned a second ago that we kind of shifted some things. You guys are technically the Western region. I work normally more with the Central region, but since when you guys came on, I was working kind of on this side. And anyways, I didn't want to leave yet. So you guys are technically in the Western region communities. But the same things about, I guess I kind of forgot. I was saying 50,000 was good. For them, they said that the first couple loans is kind of a check-in. They have a little bit of a different process, but it's basically the same. I have a number. I say 50,000. They're saying the first couple loans. But that's kind of the main things that's changed. Just this little page of program money and loan money. But really all it's saying is that we're going to be a little more involved this coming year. But as far as the award agreement, same stuff. We just want it to be a partnership. We talked, I don't know if you were going to say this, but I'm going to say it. We talked about, leadership team, what that looks like when you guys became an e-community. We had created a separate board. It was kind of a smaller group. And we had some things to do for a while, but it kind of puttered out, which is fine. That happens. And so now a few months ago, kind of changed it to this regular meeting board. I think that would be good for using this group as the leadership team. And every so often, if it pops up on the agenda, great. I have a community that's not too far, Clay County e-community. She has a subgroup. She has a special committee, but they meet every other month. And like now, this kind of is the beginning of our fiscal year. It's July, and so this last month, we talked about, what programs we want to host this year, and we just kind of got it all out there, and we kind of picked and choose what we want to do this year, and now we have a game plan for the year. And the next fiscal year, we'll talk about, okay, what do we want to do this year? And so that's, I think, is kind of a good way to do it. And so if we want to talk about at some point, whether it be today or maybe the next meeting, what do we want to achieve as goals for e-community this year? Might be something worthwhile. Do you guys have any questions for me?
We were a level B last year. So because we didn't use any loans, we didn't have loans, is that kind of...
Yeah, loans, I know, because you guys do a great YEC program. We had just Ice House.
We had Ice House, the YEC, and then we also sent a couple people to Destination Boot Camp, but when they were in Marion, which I think was last fall.
Yeah.
Um,
And you guys all got points for that, especially, like I said, mostly with the tightening of the scoring, especially on the program money. Level C is kind of the standard, and then it goes like way above and beyond, kind of from B and A. And it has almost equal amount to do with hosting programs as it does to do, or as it has to do with just leadership team, meeting regularly, keeping Network Kansas involved, and some of that kind of thing, those things too. So, but like I said, I don't know. Some of it looks bureaucratic, but I think generally we're pretty flexible. There hasn't really been a time I've had to say really no to anything yet. So we want something in place so that it's official, but we as an organization try to be entrepreneurial ourselves.
Any questions?
So if we're in the level C, we're also in the level 3 on the back page. At the 5% minimum interest rate.
Yeah, that was one thing I noticed. You had the one loan that you do have is 2%. And I think that was that in the first year?
Yeah.
Looking at the loans, the next loan that you would look at if we were to do it, it would need to be 5. And I will let you know too, even with some of the level ones, it kind of says set their own terms, but we do have one community that's a level 1 that still does 0. And I've talked to them about it because we've talked about, it's a revolving loan fund. If you got a 0% interest loan and one business fails, we're going backwards. And so I feel like I'm on the cusp of getting them. It's Lyon County, and the group that partners with them is the Main Street, and Main Street, their own program to 0%, and so it's hard for them to get them out of that mindset. But even the couple that used to do 0% before have all at least done 2. So everybody's at 2 above. I still have some communities, even level 1, Reno County, they charge like 6-7%, even though they can choose. Just because their board has kind of said, well, we want to be equal with the banks or close to the bank because we don't want to be competitive. So it's really kind of all over the board of what the communities have done. But, yeah.
Any other questions? I mean, ultimately, what we need to do is we will need to approve the agreement, and then I'll need to have 3 people sign it. If we want to continue on with the community program. I suppose if we don't, and we are done, then basically this is the
it's just
to get us in.
Yeah, it's just to stay in the program, to have access to the money that you didn't have before. I don't think, if you do decide to get out, which I hope you don't, you could always apply again in the future, but we had one out of our 60 communities, or 64, we did have one intentionally get out in the first year. This is the first time we've ever had anybody leave, and it's Osage County, and they just haven't used it at all. I mean, they don't even respond to emails or anything from the Eastern Region League. So that's the only one that we have out. But,
Can you tell me who signed that?
I'd have to go look. Yeah. Did you?
Well, it's supposed to be
You can't read
Steve
it.
Hadley.
Oh wait. Oh, so who signed it?
Steve
Yeah.
Hadley with that signature.
And then Steve Hadley.
Oh yeah, Steve Radley. Yeah. Well, and it looks probably better on the actual one. Do you have the actual? Well, not better, but
yes. And
I mean, you probably still couldn't read it, but his name's underneath the line.
Or Eric?
Or Eric. Okay.
Or, which one is it?
I'm assuming it's. I don't know. It looks more like an E, I guess, from the first letter.
Don't you recognize the signature? See it all the time.
I don't see it all the time. I don't look at the checks.
It's Connie's secretary.
Are you looking for a motion? Michelle?
Yes. I mean, if we would like to stay in the program, then I would like a motion.
I'll make a motion that we stay in the Network Kansas program. Eventually, we can get somebody off the couch.
I think it's better to stay than not.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've had nothing but positive.
Craig made a motion to stay in this Network Kansas program. Ron to second it. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried.
I'm going to go grab the official things for his signatures.
Well, I might need that auto guide system back. Right now in Nebraska, complaining about his.
It's on a different meeting.
Just heads up.
I'll let you start.
I have to sign.
Yeah.
There's a nice thin barred 3 signatures.
And then zigzag.
Which way am I going to pass it?
Just put it in the middle.
Coming to you. I signed so many documents, my signatures for.
Can we read it? Can we read it?
Yes, you're welcome to stick around if you want to.
Oh,
You can head off. You're welcome to. Doesn't matter.
I'll probably stick. I'm going to meet in Salina here in a while, so I
Okay.
kind of need to make some time. If that's okay.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine. There's a lot of excitement here. All right. Next up is the Historic Preservation Fund project. Again, as a little bit of background, so a year ago we got the grant from the Kansas Historical Society to do a survey of downtown Lincoln, downtown Sylvan, and Lincoln City Park. The surveys, basically the project is, as originally planned, is done. The surveys are done, the boundaries, proposed boundaries have been put together, and that's Lincoln. This is Sylvan. A month ago, I think this was after our last meeting, but we had a public meeting in Sylvan and in Lincoln to kind of talk about what this whole survey is, what does it mean, what is our next step, with the next steps options being one is we do nothing. We've got a lot of information that we could use from an educational perspective on our history, or we can move forward with the actual designation. The survey said that downtown Sylvan is eligible for the state register, and downtown Lincoln is eligible for the national register, and the city park is also eligible for the national register. So at the public meetings, Brenda Spencer, who's a consultant, been doing all this. She kind of explained what the survey is and what designation is and what that means. And I would say everybody that attended seemed very positive about moving forward with designation. And not only that, but let's do that sooner rather than later. So if we move forward with designation, there's a whole other process here that we need to do, the actual National Register nomination. The nomination is a document that kind of puts all this more history together than what was just kind of put in the survey reports. And if we want to get that done, one option is that we can hold off till next February and apply for another historical society grant to basically do the exact same thing. We've paid for the consultant to do the survey, now we can pay a consultant to do the nomination. And that would cover a good chunk of the cost. But that would put us out basically 2 years from now of having actually the downtowns listed on the National Register, which means any property owners who have improvement projects planned, if they want to capitalize on tax credits or anything like that, they're going to have to wait until basically 2 years until they're actually eligible for those things. So that's one way to do it, but that's the long way to do it. But in terms of coming up with the money, that would be less money we would have to come up with to do it. If we want to do it faster, then we need to figure out how to fund it now. If we move right away, we've got $4,700 left in the grant that we have from the state that we can roll over to do a National Register nomination. But that deadline is basically the end of September for spending those funds and having at least some sort of product done. So we would need to move here pretty quickly in order to take advantage of that $4,700. On the second page of what I included in the agenda is a memo that I put together for the city of Lincoln and Sylvan. But the second page kind of shows what the costs here are if we want to move forward with this. And I'll kind of explain my thinking here. If we hire Brenda Spencer, which I've got contracts from her, if we want to move forward, to do the downtown Lincoln nomination, it would cost $8,500. To do the city park nomination, it would cost $3,500. And Terry Lilac, if she would want to do the Sylvan Grove nomination, $3,000 for that. So a total project cost of $15,000. Here's where, if you follow my thinking, the Lincoln projects are $12,000. The leftover grant money that we have, because it's ultimately federal money coming through the state, it has to go to a National Register nomination. So that $4,700 cannot be used on the Sylvan downtown. So if we take the $12,000 for Lincoln projects minus the $4,700 of leftover grant money, that means cash that we need to come up for the Lincoln projects is $72.76 and $3,000 for the Sylvan, which means we need to come up with $10,276 to get these nominations done. And of that, 71% would be the Lincoln share and 29% would be the Sylvan share. So in order to come up with that, if we apply for a Dane Hansen grant of, I'm just going to say $5,000. I've yet to make an application, but that's what I'm thinking we apply for. I'm going to hope that maybe the Historical Society can kick in a little bit. I'm going to go to their board meeting next week or two. And then economic development, if we would be willing to put in $3,184. And that may seem like an odd number, but basically if you add up what our commitment has been with these survey projects, and then what if we commit to anything for this the nomination process, that would make our total commitment towards all of this whole thing over the past year and the next few months at $10,000 is what we would have put in. So that would leave another $1,892 that I'm short of. I've gone to both city council meetings. Lincoln, at their meeting on Monday night, they did approve $1,343. I'm going to approach the Sylvan City Council, and they seem supportive, but they wanted some time to think about whether they put in any money on that.
They just don't, a couple of them don't see the benefit.
Yeah, that was. And I guess, from my perspective, it doesn't necessarily need to be the city. If there's any
And
property
they're willing.
owners.
Most of them, I've talked to some of them.
Okay. I think we'll be able to figure out a way to do it. We just didn't get the 100% of approval from the city. So,
Well, we talked after the meeting, and there's, like I said, there's a couple of them that's like, how's it benefit the city? They don't see it at all. And it's like, because and I tried to explain to them, you know, you maintain your buildings better, you have an opportunity, but they're like, it's just money out of our pocket.
So that's kind of my plan for how to fund basically getting all of these nominations done. If we do it now, I'm thinking by spring, let's see, I think it would be, February, March, early spring is when everything would be official. And part of that reason is because we have to hit these quarterly meetings that the Kansas Historical Review Board has. They only meet 4 times a year, so they've got to prove it, which means we got to get into their timeline to get on their agenda. So, let's see, one other thing. The trick with this, though, is if you decide to move forward, you know, I'm not going to know if I get Dane Hansen funds until basically the end of August. But the consultant needs to start working sooner rather than waiting a whole nother month to get started, because she's got to have her work done by the end of September in order to use that 4,700. So if we move forward and commit to a contract with her so that we can use this 4,700, we're kind of putting ourselves on the hook. If Dane Hansen doesn't come through, then we might have to come up with that extra funding. The Sylvan project, we can hold off on that for a while. I mean, because that project isn't tied to the grant, so we can kind of hold off on making any commitment until the city decides what they're going to do. We've got some time on that, so we don't necessarily have to commit to that. But it's the Lincoln, especially, I think, for the grant funds, if we commit to doing the downtown one, that means we'll be able to use all the 4,700 leftover grant funds, which means if the Dane Hansen funds doesn't come through, I think we'll still be okay if we don't move forward with anything else. But just to put it out there, we might have to end up putting a little bit more in if we decide to move forward without knowing about Dane Hansen. If any of that makes sense. Or if I'm rambling. Which is possible.
For us, it's scary that we all understood.
So is there, like, anywhere in your budget that there's just like a slush fund that you can pull this out of? I mean, since you did the $5,000 grants for like the 5 entities, and I don't know, 1 or 2 of them maybe you're doing it.
Not one of 2 of them.
So there's actually money that's floating around out there that was dedicated for other stuff.
That's not going to happen. Yes.
So
that's kind of what I'm thinking is, I feel pretty good that we're not going to spend a chunk of money there because those projects aren't going to come through by the deadline, so we can use this for that. Ultimately, I guess what I need to know, the main question today is, do we want to commit to moving forward? Do we want to approve the contract with Spencer Preservation, which there's 2 in here. One is for the downtown, which is $8,500, and one is for the city park, which is $3,000. And because she's going to need to get going. If we want to hold off, then we're foregoing the 4,700.
But any business that has an air conditioner in it or a roof on it is stupid not to promote this. I mean, it's just.
Well,
it's
yes.
just.
And the city, I mean, that was kind of what I told them is, the city hall, they're going to benefit from this. If they want to use the upper floor and put in an elevator, that's at least going to be a $100,000 project. They're going to get $25,000 back in tax credits. So putting in $1,300 to make sure that they're eligible for $25,000 is a simple decision.
It's kind of, simple math for some people, difficult for others.
Yeah. But, so yes, I mean, and that's why I kind of feel like let's open this up for people sooner rather than later, because I'm sure somebody's has a roof project now, and that they're not going to want to wait 2 years for it, or air conditioner, electrical, water heater, masonry, new windows, something like that.
I wonder if the VFW would, because their building is eligible.
Are they?
Well, they're in 138, right? No, I'm looking at the wrong.
I don't think they
Oh,
are.
yeah, that's Hayden, that's,
See, there's a couple of them in Sylvan that, because everything is covered up and she can't really see to tell you. There's a couple buildings that are probably older than some of the ones that are qualified or that are contributing. But because unless you let her go tear stuff off, or somebody tears it off for her so that she can look at it, it's kind of a moot point.
And yeah, there is a way that just because someone's non-contributing right now doesn't mean they can't make a case for them switching that. But yes, you're going to have to...
included in that district.
Yes, but you're going to have to kind of do a little bit of work first to prove that, there's a historic building underneath whatever metal siding has been put up. And then you kind of have to work with them to get your status flipped, and then you can apply for it.
If you're so inclined to do so. Well, I mean, some of them, if you had to tear off all the metal siding or aluminum or whichever it was that they faced it with to protect the wood, that'd be a pretty scary thought for some of them. How else are you going to preserve that building if you expose it again? I mean, because wood's going to deteriorate quicker, exposed to the elements. I don't know. What's the worth, I guess?
So what are you guys thinking?
Guess you probably want a motion of some kind.
Well, I guess,
Move forward,
yes,
you want a motion.
if you don't make a motion move forward, then, and want to think about it, that's certainly an option, but I do feel like with that 4,700, Brenda waiting another month to start her work is not going to get it so that she can be done in time for us to be on the grant deadline for using the funds. So
How's the Dane Hanson Foundation fund things of this nature?
well, I don't know if they've
Where does-
done funded nominations before. I guess I feel like we can make a good case. But I don't know. I like to think they would fund it, but who knows?
Seems like we've done a lot of work and not moved forward.
I do feel like, if we have all these entities locally saying that they're putting in something, entity likes to see that, that they're not being asked to do the whole thing, that there is support from different organizations going into it. So that's kind of another reason why I'm trying to show get at least a little bit from as much as possible.
I make a motion that we move forward with the historical historical preservation. To go to the next step
Rhonda made the motion to move forward with the Historic Preservation Fund project. Craig seconded the motion. Any more discussion?
Does that mean approving the contracts, or do you want to do that in a different? Basically, the contracts are exactly the same as what it looked like the previous one that we signed. It's just revised for the specific area and amount.
Yeah, I mean, to get the contracts and everything, I mean, that would be moving forward with it.
So you're adding that to the motion?
Yeah, to go ahead and,
What
I
exactly
mean,
did
you
you
don't know
add?
that, well, to go ahead and make the grant, or request the grant, whatever, for, to enhance and to get the monies and whatever. Is that what you want?
Yeah, so let's say the motion would be...
How do you want me to say that?
Yes. The motion to move forward with the historic designations of downtown Lincoln, downtown Sylvan, Lincoln City Park, and to approve the 2 contracts for Spencer Preservation for downtown Lincoln and City Park. Yes.
Okay.
With the knowledge that if we don't get the grant, we may be getting funds in the future.
We might be on the hook, yes.
Yeah. So it's
Okay. 2, move forward with a multifaceted situation. To move forward with historic preservation, contracting with Terry Lilac and Brenda Spencer to write the grants, and then for the let's see, funds for, and that we as a economic development may use some of our funds to move forward with this. If those funds are not, if we don't get the grant. I think I might have got it all in there.
I'll second
Just a second.
whatever she said.
Any more discussion?
Like, pin that down.
All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
So, just to update you guys, between the last meeting and now, I had sent an email around requesting approval for a business revitalization grant to Sears Clothing. So I sent your application around, and everybody, I don't have my tally in front of you, but I think heard back from 5, and everybody approved it. So I have talked to Carly in the last week or 2 to know where she is with purchasing the sign, but the grant amount was for $596.75. Another update on the North Central Regional Planning Commission's home ownership program. I don't remember if I mentioned this before, but there's 8 loans that they can help with, and so right now there's 4 that have been are in the process, and they've got allocated for assistance through this program. So we've got 4 more that's out there. I think that there's probably a couple more that maybe they haven't got to that process yet, but they're in the pipeline of getting their getting funds. So I think I guess at this point I feel pretty good that we'll use up all those 8 by the end of August. If we don't use them up by the end of August, then we kind of open ourselves up for Ellsworth County to tap into the allocation that we got. And they've already used up all 8 of theirs. The allocation they had, that went probably within 2 weeks. They had people, so they're going to be circling us for whatever we don't use. So I'm hoping that with all the...
I know one they already closed on.
Have they? Okay. Good. So that's the status there. I'm going to do another daycare provider meeting. I think this will be the third one now that I've done at the end of the month. There's been a few other new people that have popped up saying that they're interested in opening up a daycare. So I thought it's time to kind of get the existing providers and the new ones and everybody together just to talk and learn from each other. I know there's 2 people that are in the licensing process right now. So we've got 4 daycare providers, licensed daycare providers now. These 2 get through the process, we'll have 6. And then there's another one who seems very interested but just hasn't got officially started with their licensing. So I kind of feel like maybe we're getting somewhere with our daycare shortage. Finally, it seems like every time one officially gets done, we end up losing one. So I think this is just something we're always going to have to stay on top of. But I guess another thing, there's a meeting in Lindsburg tonight. The Lieutenant Governor is doing a rural road trip kind of thing, listening to her. So on my way to Lindsburg, I'm going to stop through Ellsworth and talk to Stacy Schmidt, who's the Economic Development Director down there. She actually sits on a daycare center's board, and so I've asked her if I could just sit down with her and ask her questions about how do you get a daycare center to work. Right now, we don't have any daycare centers. We just have in-home providers. How do you make a daycare center actually profitable?
That,
So,
it used to be a daycare there to the west of the grade school across the street.
It's preschool.
Oh, down here?
Or was that always a preschool?
here,
Started out as a donut shop.
Yeah.
I think it's
No, I mean,
preschool.
Oh, did?
Yeah.
And then Sharon Markley got that.
Preschool.
Not a preschool, daycare, preschool.
It wasn't
Sharon's
necessarily,
partner or whatever.
it wasn't necessarily a daycare.
Not from the start. She
No,
made that
preschool.
donut shop.
Yeah.
Parents is teachers.
Vicki Levine and Mrs. Krangle had a
I
little
mean, is that
bakery in
kind of
there.
what you're thinking along the lines of?
Well, no, a preschool would be different than a daycare
No,
center.
what I mean,
Standalone
a
facility.
standalone
Yes,
facility.
yeah.
Yeah,
So that's,
and somebody that would fire that up
yeah.
and go with it.
As I have talked to other economic development directors, because we're all talking about daycare, it's an issue everywhere. But my impression is every daycare center that's opened always ends up having to be subsidized by somebody, whether it's the city, county, or school, or who knows. And so I've just kind of always steered away from that. Maybe that's not our answer, because I don't know anybody who's going to be thrilled about subsidizing something. So I've kind of been trying to focus on getting more in-home providers.
Did the in-home providers get subsidized though by the?
Well, they get
No,
meal subsidy.
They can apply for a food program where they can get money for food, but that's a hard way to get money from what they explain, just in terms of, because you got to prove, you got to track that you
Yeah,
provide
really keep track.
fruits and vegetables and blah blah blah. And there's a lot of paperwork that comes with
There
getting
is,
that.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah. But
All
other
I
than
know
that,
is
they're
what
not
I hear from
subsidized.
hearsay from my daughter-in-law's sister,
Oh,
that whatever, that's,
okay. That's probably the food program that she's involved in.
I
I
imagine.
think all of them get in on that.
I think so.
I imagine. I wasn't under the impression it was that terribly difficult for her to be involved with that program.
Well, I think if you figured out a
But maybe
system,
she's got a system.
yeah,
And she's been at it a long time.
yeah. For those that have been at it, and they've got themselves into a system of tracking all this stuff. But if you're getting started, it's a lot to track.
As far as subsidies for a standalone facility, what are you talking about? Probably for rent over?
Well,
over
just-
wage or
Yeah, just
over labor?
Well, any of the churches would they want to do anything like that? I don't.
None of them have any money either.
Sorry.
So, and I guess that's why I'm not necessarily saying we need to start a daycare center, but Stacy has said she's on a board for one. So, well, how do they make it work down
I
there?
thought that was a USDA project.
Well, it is. Maybe it was. So I'm just kind of curious of what kind of funding you think it started and how did they keep it going?
That's under the impression that they made a little money.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe weren't.
Well, isn't the one over there a not-for-profit? I believe.
Yes, I think it
So
is.
the daycare and the providers do very well,
Yeah,
but maybe not.
I'm
I know
not sure. I think it probably depends on what they think, what the provider thinks is doing well or
Yeah.
not.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, it's fairly well.
Are they in the Next Millionaires Club? Probably not.
But I've
Maybe
also
a restaurant owner, maybe.
yeah, other economic development directors. It seems like there's grant funding to start daycare centers, but they 2 years into it, they're like, how do we keep this thing going? So it's not necessarily getting it up and going. That's the hard part. Because there's grants for nonprofits to do that, but it's the sustaining it into the long term that's hard. And so that's why I'm gonna just trying to talk to Stacy about it, see how they do that. The unmanned aircraft systems flight corridor forum update. I don't know if you want to talk about that or show the map around, but basically, Eastern Lincoln County is on a flight corridor for a drone training program.
Seen any flyover? Have you seen any flyover?
They're hard to see.
They're very high.
So there's been a couple public forums. There were two in Beverly yesterday.
Well, they say they don't have the emissions like the jets used to.
No contract.
It's
It's odd that the government's letting us know that something's flying over when they're watching everything they're doing. Anyway.
These are training missions, practice missions coming out of Fort Riley, and they fly up this way just about to Cranglers, and then they go to the Smoky Hill bombing range, circle there and go back. No weapons on board, no ground surveillance. Always accompanied with 2 other helicopters or something, and they'll be at 4,000 feet or higher.
The NSA already knows your pickup sitting out in front of this building. Why are they worried about us wondering where their drones at?
Well, I got on
No
the committee.
surveillance. I find that humorous.
Doug McKinney asked me to get on the committee last fall, so I got on this committee. They wanted one representative from each county, from Ellsworth County, Lincoln County, and then the other 3 between here and Fort Riley. And I guess the best part of it was we got to go to Fort Riley and do a hands-on on these unmanned aircrafts and spend a day over there on the fort. And they showed us stuff about them. But the committee has to do with, we hired a company out of Florida, and they come up and put all this paperwork together and meet with the landowners and have these public forums. It's an informative deal for the landowners. Not that most of them won't ever notice it. We hear a plane overhead, we don't even look up most of the time.
Well, we got helicopters flying over there, like almost 5 times a week.
Yeah.
And multiple, and they're just,
These will always be accompanied with probably 2 Black Hawk helicopters. And if they're going over Westfall, they'll be going north or south.
I mean,
It's just kind of normal to,
it's normal to have a bunch of this aircraft stuff.
yeah, most of the people that got letters in the mail, the landowners said, we don't care. So, they sent out 40 letters to landowners in Lincoln County, and 10 people showed up at the meetings yesterday. And some of them weren't even landowners that were under this designated flight path.
I'll worry about it when I see a big chunk of ground disappear in front of me from a bomb hitting it. And I'll go, holy crap, something's above me.
Well, they're not supposed to be carrying live ammo. So if you hear something, that's what's going on. It's just another day.
Sounds like a gnat.
These are big. They're not the little bitty things.
Yeah, they're big.
The biggest one's as big as a spray plane.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they'll fly 25 hours on a tank of fuel. But this little flight, it's 85 miles from Fort Riley to Smoky Hill, and it takes them 30 to 40 minutes to make their trail.
Right along.
They're not real fast like a fighter jet, but
The ones that they're gone before you knew they were here.
yeah.
That's enough.
F4s.
So that's kind of most of it on the UAS.
On US Tower, I really don't have an update. I have sent a couple emails to the attorney that we were working with on the bond and Travis, and haven't heard anything back. So I'm assuming that means everything's fine and they're just trucking along. But I haven't seen any construction out there, so I know they wanted to have things going and actually done here, this fall. So at least part of it. So I'm thinking they want to get started, but I haven't really heard much. I don't know if you guys have heard anything on the street, but all is good there, I guess.
Well, I know everybody's working overtime out
I
there.
know they're busy.
The doors are open Sundays even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they've got those the ones with the solar panels on now too. It seems like there's a lot of them coming out the door. They're sitting out front anyway the other day.
Yeah, I saw them the other day. They were the ones with the self-leveling auto light. They had them out by the highway on the slope, and
Oh, that would
they
be cool.
extended them on that slope by the highway. They were testing to make sure everything was working. But I think Travis said then with the solar panels can operate 180 days without any maintenance to them. You just park them and leave them, and between the solar power and the generator on board, you don't need to tend to them for 6 months or longer. So it's a good deal. Progress.
Another progress, the veterinary clinic is going to be opening their permanent location have their grand opening on July 13th. That's Saturday. So, they started out with the mobile clinic and now they've bought the building and they are opening up the permanent one. It's not going to be open 5 days a week, but it's going to be more than just the 1 day a week that they've been coming with mobile units. So I think it's going to be 2 or 3 maybe.
2 days. They're advertising on the radio Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Oh, okay.
I hear them on 104.3
Okay.
several times a day. They're advertising their open house.
Cool, good. So that's what I know there. I guess if you're around on Saturday, stop by and check it out. So they've done a good job. I mean, knowing what it looked like when they first bought the building to what it looked like now, they put a lot of work on the inside of that, and it looks really good. Done a good job. A couple other things. So the Chamber of Commerce, speaking of the grants from last year that the interns put together, or the project that interns were working on last year that were coupled with an up to $5,000 grant from us to get those projects done. The Chamber is very close to wrapping up the front of their building. They were one of the projects. So I've got bills for that. The total project cost is $8,347.28. So we said we would do 50% up to $5,000. So our part of that would be $4,173.64. So here's the bill if you want to take a look. meant to take a picture of the front of the building and show kind of the before and after, but I forgot. The only thing left is painting the door. 'Cause right now it's kind of a
And
dark
the mailbox.
brown and paint and putting a mailbox on. So I guess what I would like is approval of reimbursing them, contingent upon them actually finishing that. Hopefully that'll put the pressure on them to get the door painted
The volunteer door painters.
sooner rather than 3 years from now. In terms of other grant projects, this Sylvan Senior, or the Lincoln Senior Center, the guy was supposed to be here in March, and then April, and then May, and then June, and now it's July, so he's coming. It's not the senior center that's not excited about it. It's the guy coming to do it. I think it's just because of the weather and for them doing all their projects everywhere. I think he's just probably been very
Chamber.
So are you looking for a motion to approve it on completion of the project?
Yeah.
I would so move. Approve the chamber's funding. Yes.
I second.
Wendell made a motion to approve the funding for the chamber door project. We had a second. Any more discussion? No more discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
And then a couple other things more for conversation or to think about. One is the Dane Hansen, their summer internship program for next summer. If we want to apply for an intern again, we would need to have an application in ideally by the 1st of September, but really it's not due to the end of October. The reason why she would like to know earlier is because there's a lot of fall career fairs that she plans to go to, so if she knows what jobs are going to be coming up for next summer, then she can be promoting them. If we don't apply until the end of October, we've potentially missed a few career fairs in that way. But I guess I'm just kind of throwing it out there. If we want an intern next year, we need to start thinking now of what that would be. My thought is, especially if these National Register or the nominations are done and property owners can be tapping into tax credits next year, maybe we keep going with that, but add a component of helping property owners through that process, the tax credit application process. So that's just kind of the one idea that I've had, but I haven't really put a lot of thought into it. I guess if you guys have any ideas, let me know, because I think by next month's meeting,
What about infrastructure type? I mean,
What do you mean?
still sort of like somebody to, like the water system, electrical plants, the streets, those kinds of things.
Well, I would say, and I talked to the city of Lincoln, actually, one of the topics that came up on Monday is that they should try and get an intern for a GIS system that they want to put together. The thing with infrastructure stuff is, I don't think I should be the supervisor for that. I mean, I think the county could apply for one, cities could apply for one to help with, whatever they need. But in terms of, I don't think I would be the good supervisor. Working with an intern on fixing a sewer pipe. Yeah, I don't think that would be good. So whoever is the appropriate person for those kind of projects or entity, that entity can certainly apply for it. And the same with, Sylvan, if the city needs an intern for next summer. So that's just something to keep in mind, but we need to be thinking about it now, I guess. And it just seems like a long time from now.
Seems like we didn't have one this summer.
No, we don't have one this summer. So that's just something to keep on to think about between now and the next couple of weeks. If you have an idea of something that we could use an intern for next year, let me know. Another thought to just kind of throw out there for our loan program, we've got a lot of loan funds available right now. I've kind of wondered with this home ownership program if that's really seemed to help spark something. Is there a way that we can model a business loan over the same thing, just kind of a small amount? Maybe it's $10,000 loan at 0% interest, and the bank is doing, $40,000 loan, so it's a $50,000 project, whatever it is. But if somebody wants to do something with their business, but they don't have whatever that down payment is, maybe to spur something along. I don't know. That was just kind of thought, how do we get a little bit of activity going? Or what if we just made it smaller, a $5,000 loan just for somebody who's maybe they've got a home-based business, and maybe it's not going to get them into a storefront by any means, but maybe it can help them get that home-based business to just grow a little bit bigger and get to another little step where a couple of years from now they might be willing to go much bigger. So I'm just throwing that out there as something to think about. We certainly have loan funds available, so I don't know how best to get it out there just for some activity, but I'm going to throw that out there for thoughts. And then last thing, just to let you think about, 5 years ago this fall we did a countywide strategic planning session, and I don't know if it would be good to plan another one in the fall. I feel like it was good for me back then. I mean, I was new on the job at that time, but it kind of helped me focus on a few key things. So would it be a good time to open back up to...
I think it keeps it fresh in everybody's mind when you do that. I mean, that way you accomplish your strategic, or the walking paths that can come out of that.
Yeah, well, yeah, this wouldn't necessarily be the strategic doing stuff,
Right.
although it certainly relates. But to kind of do, I guess, get people's perception of what we economic development specifically should be working on. So I just want to throw that out there since it's going to be 5 years this fall. Or if the fall is a bad time to do it, maybe we do it another time of year in the middle of winter or something like that. I don't know, but just think on that, throwing it out there. And then I do have one very quick executive session question for you guys. But before we do that, I guess my upcoming schedule. I ended up not taking any vacation time over around Memorial Day. There was just too much stuff going on. So I actually thought my summer vacation, maybe I'd take some Fridays off here in July. Mostly because I've got a building that I'm still trying to figure out what I need to do. And there's a lot of people I need to call, but I need to call them during the day, and that just doesn't happen when I'm here. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. I can always let you know this Friday morning's going to be busy, so it might end up just being this Friday afternoon. But does anybody have a problem with that if the next couple Fridays I take some time?
Then we'll have check the schedule.
Let me get back to you next month.
Yeah. Well, unless you tell me there's a problem, I'm just gonna kind of do it.
See, there you go.
That'll work out well. July 15th, I'll be in Portland for a Kansas-Nebraska National Heritage Area meeting. On the 17th, I'll be back in Lindsborg for this Meet in the Middle Legislative Rural Policy Summit. There's a lot of focus on trying to get rural, what's the word I'm looking for? Feedback, or trying to listen, at least listening to rural voice instead of always being drowned out by what's going on in Kansas City and Wichita. Then there's an Economic Development Directors Roundtable in Lenore on the 24th, and the North Central Regional Planning Commission Board meeting in Melvindale on the 25th. So
Nice one to work too, right? So she's got her
yes, and tonight I'll be in Lindsborg, but it's different. It's the governor, lieutenant governor's rural listening tour. This one next week is a few legislators rural listening tour. Or that's not really a tour. I think it's just a one-stop tour. Other than that, that's what I've got, except for just one quick executive session topic.
Did the free house thing go through? Did they sign the contract? Is that a done deal? Or?
Last I knew, it hadn't been signed yet, but they were working on a contract, so it's still pending. So I believe, what I've heard is it still looks like it's going to happen. It's just kind of moving slow. You guys have anything else? Otherwise, I would like go into executive session for the purpose of confidential data relating to financial.
We need a motion for executive session, confidential data relating to financial affairs or trade secrets of corporations, partnerships, trusts, and individual proprietorships.
Just in time.
Who wants to make the motion?
Probably for, let's just say 10 minutes.
We go into executive session for confidential data relating to financial affairs or trade secrets of corporations, partnerships, trusts, and individual proprietorships for 10 minutes. Is that what you said?
Hold in just a second.
I'll second.
Rhonda made the motion for the executive session, and David seconded it. Any more discussion for that? All in favor, aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.